All right, hi everybody. Welcome back to the Human Challenge, where we explore all the human challenges in today's world, the challenges of being human, and how we can challenge ourselves to be more human for the greater good. Today, we are joined by Miranda Ayim, founder of Cultivate Co. and three-time Olympian with Team Canada. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Hi, Vanessa. So happy to be here with you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I also, maybe I should add to your title here, the way I introduced you. You were recently added to the London Hall of Fame, correct?
I
Honored and
was.
gifted.
Yeah. Sports Hall of Fame. So I was sharing with you earlier, just excited to celebrate with friends and family. Like those opportunities only come once in a while. So yeah, lots of celebration and happy times.
And I know you were saying too that because most of your career was international, right? Maybe if you can elaborate a little bit on that, because I think most of your career was international, and then I think just coming back home was just a nice experience.
Correct. Exactly. For women's sports, unfortunately, and specifically for basketball, there's not a lot or any opportunities to go pro in Canada. So most of us, there's a bit of an athlete drain, and we head to the States for school. So I went to university at the Pepperdine University in California for 4 years. So I left around 17, 18 from Canada. Then I turned pro and went overseas. And I spent 3 seasons in Turkey, and then the last 8 seasons of my career were in France, mostly the southern southwest part of France. And summers were with Team Canada. Also had a brief stint in the WNBA with the Tulsa Shock when the Tulsa Shock existed.
Right.
Yeah, so I just bounced around, had a lot of opportunities to see the world, which is part of what makes sports so cool.
That's amazing. And like I love that. I mean, so how many years in total was this your career? How long would that have been?
11 years pro plus 4 in
Yeah.
the NCAA. So, yeah.
And so then what was your transition like kind of coming out of sports? You were the founder of Cultivate Co. Like what was that journey like?
Goodness. Like I was so the last 11 years was pro, but as any athlete knows, there's a lot of years before that working towards. So typically I say like my lifespan with Canada basketball was 20 years with like developmental. I started taking it really serious at 13 where you're going to school, but then like after school you go to practice, then you go to club practice, and then you're like away tournament. So your entire life, your entire identity actually is athlete, which is great in one sense because you're actively working towards a goal and trying to be the best and reach this excellence, and it's a wonderful space to be in. But at the same sense, a lot of athletes run into this sense when they retire, they step away from sport, whether that's injury or just lifespan, or they decide to do something differently. There's this conflict of or crisis of identity of like who am I if I'm not playing sports? Like what value am I? Like, do I have worth as a person? Like, what do I have to offer? And then just the logistical qualms of I don't really have work experience other than being on the court. So what do I want to do outside of sports? What other talents do I have? How do I develop them? Who do I talk to? I've been outside of Canada. How does this system even work? I'm more familiar with the French system than I am with the Canadian system as an athlete. So many things that you don't really consider. Um and it's just like change in general for anybody who's moving
Yeah.
from university into the professional sphere, or like moving jobs or cities. Change is hard, and there's emotional turbulence that comes with it. So all of that to say it's been a ride. It's been a ride, but thankfully I have a wonderful support system, and I've had a lot of great opportunities that I've been able to take advantage of, and to hopefully make the transition as smooth as possible.
And so, do you still consider yourself like in that transition? Just based on kind of what you just said, like I'm curious. Do you still consider yourself like in that? And
I do. Yeah, I still feel right in the thick of it. Sometimes people will be like, "Oh, you've like transitioned so well." I'm like, "Y'all, I'm still in the thick of it." It looks like if it looks like I have things figured out, I don't. Cuz like honestly, we're all just figuring it out. Like doesn't matter what age you are. You're 60 years old, you're still figuring things out. We're
yeah,
all doing the best we can with what we've got, right? So I will say I feel more settled now than I did when I wouldn't actually even say when I immediately retired because I jumped right into a couple of jobs I was actively interviewing while I was still playing. I remember taking one interview with RBC because they have a RBC Olympians program, a kind of an ambassador program. I took that interview while I was in the hotel room in Tampa preparing for the Tokyo 2020 Olympics. And so like that's just my personality. I like to be prepared. I want to know like what's coming next. And I did the same. I took another interview when I was still in France. I was in my house in France with the Smith School of Business, and they have a coaching program that helps their MBA and master's students kind of go through that process and work together as a team because nobody knows how to work in teams. So we kind of facilitate that process. So I jumped right into things after I retired, um, which I learned a lot. But in retrospect, it was probably a little bit too fast. I
Right.
didn't take the time to pause, to consolidate, to yeah, just to take in that previous 20 years, right? That's was go go go, and a lot of Olympic athletes have this sense when they stop, they like crash
Right.
because the same sort of thing, the identity issues, the just transition, being in a different place, even though it's home. Um, and I think that crash hit me actually more towards the beginning of this year because I was
Oh,
going, started my business, like trying to do
right.
big things, make some moves, and then finally my body and brain was like, actually, we need to take a little break. So I took an intentional slowdown to what I was saying yes to,
Mhm.
because as a lot of entrepreneurs will know that you want to say yes, you want to take advantage of all the opportunities and get yourself out there. But I made a shift to be a lot more intentional in what I wanted to do and making sure everything was really aligned with um, where I was headed.
Right. And I really appreciate that perspective. And I appreciate it for a couple reasons. One, because I think it's very relatable to everybody, right? Like it's not just anyone coming out of sports. It's like very relatable to anybody that who am I? What am I doing? Like, those are very big questions for a lot of people. And I
Mhm.
think, taking that intentional time, right? Like we tend to do that. We just like go, go, go. We don't really pause and actually consider, what are my intentions? What is in alignment with me and who I am? And but to your point too, right? Like those are that's an exploration. Like, an answer to that question. There's never really a definite answer to that question, right? Like it's always evolving. As you evolve, the answer to that question just consistently changes, right? Like it's just I always say, like, for me, I kind of live my life. I'm like, is this like sitting well with me? Yeah, okay. And then the minute it stops, I'm like, guess I'm just gonna find something else now. What's interesting to me? What's not interesting to me? And I think that's just
Mhm.
like evolution in itself.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's this inherent sense of wanting a finality to the answer. Like,
Yeah.
tell me yes or no, black or white. But like the world is shades of gray as much as we don't want it to be, because like it's like you said, it's an active exploration, and mainly because as we grow, things shift, our values shift,
Hmm.
different people come in and out of our lives, and so different things are required. And so you need that constant reflection and evaluation in order to get to the next stage. And I also should put a caveat of not too much reflection and
Right.
evaluation
Yeah.
because for us introspective people, I put myself in that camp. You can get in that cycle of overthinking where you're not actually taking the action step of like just doing it. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just needs to be done or good enough and putting yourself out there. So it's a delicate balance in that space as well.
I totally appreciate that. Yeah, it's just yeah, baby steps, right? Sometimes you just gotta like take that one step, and it's like, oh, okay, and just the next step, and then the step after that, and just kind of see how that feels. Um,
Hmm.
I had a question too for you about so you were talking about your transition out of sports, and I mean, I'm very curious. Is there a way to because you're so busy, right? Like you basically like your whole life is athletes, is like athlete sports. Like how do you think there's even like a possibility to have made that transition easier for you during the times of you, doing the training and this and that? Like, because it just seems that you're so busy. Like, I'm like, is there even an opportunity there that could have been supportive, or I don't know. Like, I'm just very curious about that.
Hmm. I think about that frequently, and I think it depends partially on the athlete and partially on what they want to do with their lives. Sometimes you don't actually have the space to think about
Yeah,
that fully until you have retired, and it's the same sort of thing what we were just alluding to. Like you're not ready for that step until you get into that chapter of your life, so
right,
maybe you don't need that prep. Um, I took many baby steps. So I had some of those interviews towards the end of my career. I already knew that I was retiring, so I was preparing myself, but I was also actively filling my time with like I was writing a blog and I was doing a podcast and just because I liked exploring different ideas and I wanted to share that, I felt I had a responsibility to share that, not just like glean the information for myself. Um and so that was I believe one of the preparations and has been actually proven helpful even in my current career because a lot of people still listen to and refer back to that podcast that I was making when I didn't even really know exactly what I wanted to do. So trust the process in that sense of like, hey, like do what is in your strengths and share that. And sometimes that is part of the learning process and building process. But at the same time, I was considering a lot of people recommend like going to school and getting your degree, getting a master or an advanced degree, depending on where you finished while you're playing, because there is actually a lot of pauses in between playing. You're practicing and you're lifting weights and you have games. And if you're traveling, the
right,
schedule is full. Like my schedule, I was playing 2 games a week, and we were playing in the French league and in the Euro league. So like we're traveling within France and within Europe every week. So it is busy, but it's doable. Like people are like moms or parents or working and they're getting degrees. So like everybody's busy. Um so but that's often something that's recommended, but I also didn't want to waste my time or money on something that I didn't know. I didn't have an idea of what I'd want to get a postgraduate degree in. So I chose not to do that. So I think, and whereas other people have. So I think it depends also what clarity you have and what direction you kind of want to move in.
right. Yeah. No, I appreciate that, and I mean, yeah, like I can't even imagine that. I think that I played high school basketball, and then I retired. I hit my prime, and then I retired after that. I was like, this is
Nice.
fun, but but like I can't even imagine, like, yeah, like I the intensity of it, and yeah, like you said, the space to even have those questions because you're just like go go go, right? And I think that that's yeah, I really appreciate that perspective and that reflection. I really do. Now I'm
Mhm.
curious, so where did Cultivate Co come from? At what point in your journey was that something that had been kind of brewing for a while? And then also what you do,
Mhm.
and et cetera, et cetera.
Mhm. I think it was a marriage between my personality and who I am and how I wish to show up in the world, my interests in general and maybe also my strengths and my gifts as I was exploring and asking those questions, okay, what could I do with what I'm good at? Just having conversations as you do with different people, exploring different avenues. Okay, as an athlete, do the number one question is like, do you want to be a coach? No, I never wanted to be a like on the on court coach. Um Mind you, I do still do some work with like camps and helping out kids and like developing or like older players as well. And I do enjoy that and never say never, right? But like some people feel really called to that. I didn't. Um or broadcasting, and I've done a few different things, but that what I didn't want that to be the main thing. I didn't believe at the time, and then I heard about coaching, and because I've always been very interested in bettering myself,
Mhm.
and how I can improve, and exploring different strategies and techniques that are helpful. I started to get really interested in that as a career choice, and
Mm,
I think that like it's a bit oversaturated, the coaching space,
mhm.
especially like when you think about like life coaches, like anybody can be a life coach, which kind of maybe devalues it in some sense, which it can get a little bit sticky when you get in those places. They're working at improving kind of like the eligibility in those spaces, but in the meantime, I settled in the world of performance coaching. So it's a bit what I do is a bit of a blend of wellness coaching and performance coaching, where I really talk about with my clients around, okay, how do you want to show up and what are the areas that matter most for you? So ensuring that our everyday actions are aligned with, okay, our ultimate direction, our North Star,
Right.
because what's the point of working towards something if it's not actually aligned with the important things? Because I see
Right.
that even in my own career, and I'm sure you do in your space, and everybody who will be listening to this, of like people have goals and they work their butts off to get towards those goals, and they exhaust themselves and they reach burnout, and then or they reach their goal and they get there and they're like, oh well,
Yeah.
this is actually really empty. Like I've
Yeah.
like alienating so many people on the path to this. I like have detrimentally affected my health because of this. And I don't even really care about this at the end of the day. It's not actually important. Like for why? So part of what I do is help people explore, okay, is this actually what I want to be doing? Is this aligned with my values, who I want to be at the end of the day?
Mhm.
And what are those daily actions that I'm taking? So we talk a lot about just habits and systems, because you are the sum of what you do every day. That's what's taking you towards that ultimate goal of your ideal self, if you will.
Yeah.
Um, but I think it's important to note in the space of betterment and self improvement. It can get a little bit um, heavy, especially in the performance space where people are always trying to be the best and earn the most, or get the most accolades. Of like,
Right.
we really need to sort out what's important, and also like have grace for yourself
Mm,
in those spaces as
mhm.
well, because you're gonna fail. You're gonna get tired. You can't grind it out every day. So another thing that I like to emphasize is what you're doing sustainable. Can you
Right.
do this over the long haul? Are you driving yourself to that burnout, injury, illness? Um, what are those pieces and systems we need to put into place that allow you to be human and exist in this
Yeah.
space to the best of your ability, but also recognizing your own limits?
Yeah. No, I love that. What I hear in there is like intentionality, right? That's kind of like the root of what it
Hmm.
comes down to. Like you said, right? Like we can have these goals, but like are we in alignment with these goals, right? Like is it truthful to who we are? And there's so many layers even to that question, right? Like there's like parts of us that are just kind of conditioned, parts of us that whether it's society, like relationships, family, etc., right? Like that's it, and it is hard. It's a very hard thing to do. And so I appreciate that perspective. And it's like intentionality and how do we like cultivate that intentionality from within. And I think that, and I can imagine working with like performance athletes, like you said, there I think there's so much pressure that is very, to make sure that you still have that other voice coming in, like, hey, you know that ideal self, is this still what we want, is this still what we're aiming for, right? And then I think having a space for that, I can imagine being very supportive to anyone on that journey.
Hmm. I I love that word, just to build on what you ended off with right there. I love that word space,
Mm,
because especially in this day and age, we're like so busy, so hectic. There's so much going on, where there's news, social media, just what all these inputs, right? There's
yeah.
like always noise going on. And when you think about like just the levels of anxiety raising in especially the younger generation, but like all across the board, of like people's minds are busy and noisy and overwhelming. And oftentimes, if we're asking ourselves these questions, it's hard to hear the answer, because we've lost connection with
Yeah.
that space of, oh, stillness, where I can kind of hear what's going on or make those connections. So I, in my own life and with the people that I work with, or when I get an opportunity to share at different events, of, okay, let's introduce this concept of like a stillness mindset. How do we cultivate stillness in our day-to-day life? How do we like expand those gaps in between? Because life goes by really quickly. It's like top speed.
Yep.
Some days you like look behind and you're like, oh, this month, this year zoomed by. But there are those little spaces in between if we actually take the moment. So whether that's how you start your day, your morning routine, am I taking some time for stillness, like
Right.
whether that's meditation or prayer or just like sitting down and having your coffee but not scrolling,
Yeah.
or multitasking or doing that, because this this busyness comes from, all this input, this everything that we're taking in, but we're also actively trying to avoid emotions coming up. So all the distractions help us alleviate those uncomfortable feelings, that stress, that distress, the sadness. So it serves a purpose, but it's actually, even though it feels counterintuitive, really helpful for our performance if we're in that performance world, but just how we're showing up on a day-to-day basis if we're coming and rooted from a space of stillness and equanimity and focus.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think too, I think for myself, even in my own journey, what I always appreciate about the space and the stillness is that it's like alleviating those emotions, but it's also the opportunity to observe it too, right? Because like when you
Mm,
can actually sit in that space and kind of, and, you know, a lot of times we end up accidentally kind of reacting to what's coming up, but we just don't realize it. But when you sit in that stillness, you can kind of see, oh, like this is what's coming up. And now I can, you know, you can reflect on it, you can observe it, you can, you know, understand maybe where it comes from and the why, right? But when we're like jam packed day to day, we don't have that ability because we're just not present, right? But then when you have those spaces, you know, it just allows you to slow down, come back and be like, oh, yeah, this is what this is. And oh, yes, this is probably happening because of this. And then you can, that, you know, be able to release that or do whatever you need to do to just, you know, figure that out a bit, I think.
yes. Oh, so good. Awareness. Awareness is the first step, and then making those subsequent steps that you mentioned. I often call it if we're talking about practices specifically,
Mm.
I implement something just called the lazy person's meditation, which is you just sit there, set a timer, sit there for
Yeah.
2 to 5 minutes. It doesn't feel long, but like that first minute is gonna tick by very slowly and very chaotically. And you're not like breathing, you're not tracking. I know a lot of us have already tried like Calm and Headspace and all those things. Super helpful. But this is, you're just sitting there
Mhm.
and watching what comes up and feeling what comes up without trying to actively
Yeah.
avoid it. And then that's when you're like, oh, I'm super stressed about what this person said 5 days ago. And why is that? And then you can start to kind of work out what might be a better and more opportune reaction to that. When you talk about reactions, and like some of them are impulses, some of them are things that we've learned as
Yeah.
kids to protect ourselves, and just a way of moving through the world, and it's worked at a different a point in our life but might not be useful, so we give ourselves the space to choose a more opportune way of responding.
Absolutely. And sometimes like our response, maybe sometimes our response is like no response too, right? Like literally sometimes it's
Mm,
just I'm just letting this pass through the body right now. I'm just allowing for this to happen and it, you know, like it just is what it is. And I've learned for myself like that is actually very hard to do. Like it took a lot
yeah,
of practice to actually get to a point of like, oh wait, I don't have to react to this. I don't have to do anything. I can literally just let it happen and it's okay, like it'll pass and life's gonna go on and you know, but I know it took me like I remember having that realization and it was funny to me that I had the realization. I was like, oh, I actually just had that realization. Why did it take me so long to have that realization, you know?
right, right.
100%. And I think the other thing you said earlier was grace. Love grace, like love it, love it, love it. I love it because it's so true and I use it that word all the time because it's just it is like about just graceful. Like these things can come up and you can sit with that and have grace for it. And like you said, just like we said,
Mhm.
right? Realizing, hey, it's here and I don't have to react to it and I can still have grace and peace with all of that. And I think it's awesome.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. It's so healing, I think, for yourself as you move through, because life is hard. So you need to extend grace to yourself, and I think the overflow from that is then you can extend grace to others. Coming back
Mm.
to what we said at the beginning of like we're all doing the best we can with what we've got, with what we know. People make mistakes, they mess up, they hurt you. But just as we want grace for ourselves, we can then extend that grace to others and hopefully make it a better world.
Mhm. Ugh, I love that. I love that so much. And I think it just kind of speaks to this point that it's like, to create a better world, we don't have to always do these big, big things, like humanitarianism, activism. They're there. And of course, they serve a purpose on a systemic level,
Hmm.
but you can do a very minor thing to change the world, have grace, come back to yourself.
Mm.
Like you can do very small actions, very small things like that can make such a big difference in the world around us. And I really, really appreciate that perspective.
Oh yeah, those groundswell movements of impacting your immediate circle and your community and making that impact with daily actions.
Yeah.
Talk about sustainability. You can do that for sure.
Oh, I love that. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today. How can we keep in touch with you? How can we hear about you and all of your grace?
Yeah, you can keep me accountable to continue to be graceful with myself and others in the way that I speak and show up in the world. No, Vanessa, this has been so incredible. I always love having these kind of conversations about important things with people who are trying to make that impact, like we mentioned too, in the world. And yeah, you can follow me anywhere I show up on the internet. I almost said interwebs and showed my age, but mirandaayim.com or cultivateco.com is, or sorry, cultivateco.ca, because I am Canadian. Get us in, follow me there. Also, Instagram, I'm active on, not so much the other social media, but reach out. Let me know what your thoughts were from this conversation or anything else. Follow a blog, my podcast as well is on Spotify, Google, wherever you get your podcast, the Miranda Ayim podcast.
Awesome. Thank you so, so much.
Thank you.